Hello, welcome. Today we are diving into Exodus chapter 26, where God gives some very specific instructions on how to build the tabernacle. Now, you might think this is just about construction, but it's actually full of meaning. The tabernacle wasn't just a tent, it was where God chose to be present with his people. Let's take a look at those curtains, frames, and coverings and see what they tell us about God's desire to be close to us. So let's start with the curtains and coverings between verses 1 and 14. So the tabernacle had beautiful inner curtains made from fine linen, decorated with purple, blue, and red yarn. Now these colors weren't just for show, they represented something heavenly. They even had images of cherubim, which you could call some sort of angels, woven into them. Now these angels symbolize God's holiness and how sin separates us from him. These curtains were joined in groups of 5 with gold clasps, making them both strong and beautiful. Then on top of the linen, there was a layer of goat hair curtains. These were a bit rougher and protected the inner beauty of the linen curtains from the outside world, just like how sin can hide the beauty of God from us. These coverings kept the inner holiness of the tabernacle hidden. And finally, 2 more layers, ram skins dyed red and strong leather, were added on top to protect the tabernacle and keep God's holiness separate from the world's impurities. Think about this. These layers show how sin creates barriers between us and God. Yet Jesus removed those barriers by dying for us, and his death allowed us to get close to God. Next, let's talk about the frames and structure between verses 15 and 30. So the tabernacle wasn't just beautiful on the inside, it was built strong as well. The frames were made of acacia wood, covered in gold and set on silver bases. These frames stood about 15 feet high and were held together with gold crossbars. And even though the tabernacle was a grand holy place, it was also portable. The Israelites could take it down and move it whenever they traveled, showing that God's presence went with them wherever they went. And think about the fact that the tabernacle could move with the people. So it reminds us that God's presence is with us everywhere we go. Now, just think about the implication of it. Sometimes you may feel that you have limited access to God, but he's always with us. And do you sometimes feel that he's not there? Do you sometimes feel that he's far away from you? Well, he's not. It might seem like it because we did something. We weren't behaving according to his righteous decree. We might even have committed something that is sinful, let's say. We might have even had indecent thoughts. But whatever the case is, God is always there with us. The veil and separation between 31 and 37 shows that it was one of the most important parts of the tabernacle, the veil itself. So this veil was made from the same colors, blue, purple, and red, and also had cherubim on it. The veil separated the holy place from the most holy place, where only the high priest could enter and only once a year. This veil was a powerful symbol of how sin separates us from God. And there was also another curtain at the entrance to the tabernacle, but this one didn't have cherubim on it. While still important, it showed that the separation wasn't as severe as the veil inside. So the veil was a reminder that because of sin, people couldn't get close to God. But today, Jesus has torn that veil. He gave us direct access to God. And how often do we forget? How often do we forget death, the specific thing, and feel distant from him? How often do we think that he's not there? How often, incorrectly, I think that just because I don't feel the presence of God, he's not there. In terms of symbolism and meaning, the tabernacle wasn't just a tent. It was like a mini version of heaven on earth, where God could be with his people. But because of sin, there were layers and separations, showing the distance between God and people. And even with all these barriers, the tabernacle pointed to a time when things would change, and things have changed. And also these barriers remind us how sin separates us from God. But because of Jesus' ultimate sacrifice, we now have unlimited access to God. As for connection to the New Testament, we see the fulfillment of the tabernacle's meaning through Jesus. As John 1:14 says, the Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. Jesus became the true tabernacle, the place where God and humanity meet. So when Jesus died, the veil in the temple was torn, meaning that now everyone who believes in him can approach God directly. If there is one thing to take away, is that through Jesus, the barriers that once separated us from God are gone. We can now have a close relationship with him anytime, anywhere. And think about this as a reflection. The structure of the tabernacle with all its layers and separations teaches us how sin creates distance between us and God. But it also points to how those barriers have been removed through Jesus. And we can eternally be thankful that because of his sacrifice, we no longer need to rely on priests or veils to access to God. We can come to him directly through faith. Amen.